interfere with the earpiece. Yeah. But seriously, I am wearing a mask inside, and I have been doing so for a couple of weeks now, just because I've seen the predictions of what might happen in the next month, and knowing that we have changed the future in the past by working together. And mask use is absolutely one of those key issues that people can do right now to protect themselves, but also to protect others, the more vulnerable than they might be to severe disease, and crucially at this time, to protect our health system. Yesterday's figures for hospitalisations with COVID are rapidly approaching what we saw at our very peak time in January, and so we need to do everything we can to slow the spread. Much more infectious. It's much closer to measles than it is to flu in terms of its infectiousness. Much more infectious than previous types of the virus. That's why we need to take action, and we need to take it now. And I think there's some really crucial things that people can do to support this effort. Firstly, wear a mask inside if you're with others. Secondly, have a chat with your employer if it's possible for you to work from home during the next couple of weeks. It does stop the transmission, it will slow the spread. How that's achieved is really a matter for others.
Oh. To get us through this winter as safely and as healthily as we possibly can. It's why we extended funding to the states for their hospital systems with COVID. It's why we've rolled out an information campaign really to encourage people to get their boosters, and why today we've expanded eligibility for the 4th dose, which will bring down severe disease and relieve pressure on our hospitals. For younger people 50 and over, which I'm happy to call myself, and that's why the big change today, I think, was to recommend a 4th dose for anyone 50 or over, and we really want to see that roll out as soon as possible. It does very much bring down the risk of severe disease. In terms of 30 to 49-year-olds, though, the evidence still is a little less clear, and that's why the Technical Advisory Group didn't make a firm recommendation for that age group, but certainly said if you want that boost in your immunity, certainly you should feel free to choose that and go out and dose number 4 for over 65s, but I have said I'm concerned that 40% of that age group still haven't gone out and got their 4th dose, so I really encourage them to do that. But also across the broader population, there are still more than 5 million Australians who have been eligible for their 3rd dose, that first booster shot, for more than 6 months but haven't got it. And I really want to urge people to get out and get that additional shot.
Mark, you were
which really summarises the advice that I've given to Minister Butler and also his colleagues, the other health ministers around Australia and at National Cabinet on Saturday, charting out what I believe is happening in Australia at the moment and what is likely to happen over the next month or 6 weeks. Essentially, my message today is that there is a new variant of COVID-19. It is circulating.
With masks today, I know you're strongly encouraging it, but do mask mandates need to be reinstated, and should that be uniform across the states given the transmissibility of this new variant?
Well, I might start with that, and the CMO can add, the CMO statement reflects the advice that was issued only on Friday, I think, in writing by all of the Chief Health Officers across the country, all of the jurisdictional Chief Health Officers. who strongly encouraged the community to wear a mask in indoor spaces, particularly crowded indoor spaces where there's not the ability to socially distance. And I think that is really the position as we move into this phase of the pandemic, providing members of the community with very clear information about what they can do to protect themselves and to minimise the size and the impact of this wave.
Does it need to be mandated?
Well, that is not the advice that was issued by the Chief Health Officers last week.
You talk about protecting the vulnerable. We're talking about, I guess, ADF in aged care homes, this surge workforce program. The numbers, I think, are only, there's like about 15 ADF staff currently, I think, deployed to aged care homes, but the aged care sector is saying they actually need more surge workforce, they want more surge workforce. Could you sort of explain, I guess, what the bottleneck is here? Is it that there's not enough ADF staff that have been, I guess, assigned to this program? Is it that the sector isn't requesting enough people? Is it they don't know they can still request staff? And one for the Professor, if I could, in your statement you talk about forecasts. What sort of forecasted numbers are you looking at over the next couple of months or couple of weeks maybe around this winter surge of cases?
Okay, I'll deal with the aged care question first. You're right, Josh, that over recent months there has been a mix of reliance on the department's surge workforce, which is nurses and personal care workers contracted or engaged by the department to be provided to aged care facilities who need them. And just last week, I think about 1,900 shifts in the aged care sector were worked or were filled by nurses and PCAs from the department's surge workforce, and that's higher than the peak we got to in the January wave. So I'm very pleased that element of the department's actions is working well. We're looking at ways in which we can expand that. We're also in discussions with the ADF, which had been starting to roll down its presence in aged care facilities. It's obviously got a range of other pieces of work it needs to do. It responded remarkably well, magnificently well to the recent floods, for example. So we're talking to the ADF still right now, actively talking to them about what ability they have to continue to contribute to continue to support members in aged care as well, and obviously talking to the sector. We'll have more to say about that shortly.
Just to clarify, so you talk about scaling down the ADF, does that mean that scaling down will continue to scale down while the other program will boost?
Well, we're certainly going to continue to try to see our surge workforce capacity increase. It's running at a higher rate than it was in January, but where the department is now talking to the ADF about whether there is additional capacity the ADF has, recognising they have other jobs they need to do as well, but whether there is some additional capacity the ADF has that they're able to contribute to the aged care sector. Those discussions are active right now.
Yes, so all of my advice, as has always been the case for the last 2.5 years, and the same with my colleagues in the states and territories, is based on the best science and the best medical advice that we have at the time. There are a range of things we look at to give that advice. We know how Omicron works. We've been through 2 waves already. This is the 3rd one. We can look back to January and give us some sense about what that does in terms of hospitalisations, ICU admissions and the like. We know from other countries, for example, the UK has gone through a BA4 and BA5 surge in recent times, in South Africa and other countries, and seen how that has worked. And we know the real data, which we've talked about already today, that we are in the 5,000s in terms of hospitalisations for the first time since around early February. So those are things. We also have forecasting, which we've had from our modellers that have provided that weekly for many, many weeks. I think we're up to report 151 now, and so we do look at that every week. But these are predictions. To give a number, an actual number to that would be false, I think, because it's a prediction. We don't know exactly what it will be. What we do know, and this is where that forecasting leads, and what I shared with ministers over the last few days, is that we can predict reasonably well up to 4 weeks from now, and in every state and territory the number of cases, according to those predictions, are continuing to rise. So we're at the start of this wave, not the end. We know that is associated with hospitalisations, but what happens in the future really very much depends on what we do today and what we've done in the last 2 weeks. the increase in vaccination, the increase in the protections in aged care, in particular around treatments and the vaccination, the increase in mask use, the increase in choices that people are making. Not to say this is an individual responsibility, but it is a combined community effort that we need to put in place for the next few weeks, and that will make a big difference in that number, whatever we get to.
Minister, are you at all concerned with the ability for hospital systems to cope with the record volume of patients with COVID-19? Do you think they have enough resources?
Well, we're obviously, we're talking at a range of different levels with states all of the time. Really, I only had a virtual meeting with my Health Minister colleagues on Sunday afternoon. We're having another meeting, I think, on Thursday. We're certainly at a ministerial level staying in very close contact about the capacity of systems at all levels to deal with this third wave. I know the Chief Medical Officer is in constant contact with his equivalents, as well as are our departmental officials. As I said, we extended our support through the rest of the year, and we're staying in close contact about what else we can do to provide states with that support. Now, obviously, these hospitalisation numbers are deeply concerning, as I said, in addition to all of the other pressures that hospitals face over the course of winter. The hospitalisation rate has increased sharply over the last several weeks. I'm pleased to say that the admission rate to intensive care units has not increased as sharply. That's been a much slower increase. We're still at probably only about half the ICU admission rate we saw in January, although hospitalisation numbers are at about the same rate. ICU admissions are at only about half that rate, because there was still a greater presence of the Delta variant back then, which was a more severe variant of COVID. So yes, we're all concerned about it. None more so than state health ministers who are responsible for the operation of their hospital systems, but we're staying in very close contact at all levels, ministerial, departmental and the chief health officers.
Minister,
yes.
On the vaccine contract review that you announced a few weeks ago, do you have any updates on how that's progressing and when a report is due?
No, I don't have anything new to say about that, except that Jane Holton is doing her work. As I said at the time I announced it, I was hoping for, I would asked her to be able to provide a report as soon as she possibly could. I wanted that measured in weeks, not months. But most importantly, I want her to be able to do the work thoroughly. So she is not only looking at the fitness for purpose of our existing procurement arrangements over the course of this year and into next, but also looking at the changing landscape. I've talked already about the vaccine for under 5s, for which we did not have a procurement arrangement because it didn't exist. Also the new variant-based vaccines, of which there are a couple already going through regulatory approval processes here in Australia and elsewhere in the world. And also there has, as has been canvassed a bit publicly over the last several days, the question of surplus supply in areas as well that I've asked Ms Holton to provide us with some advice about.
On the children's vaccines, you said the supplies aren't available at this stage yet. Do you have any idea of when we will start seeing substantial supplies? And can you explain, I guess, why it's so difficult to obtain these at this point? Obviously, it's one company making them. Isn't it just a smaller dose of the current vaccine that we use for adults?
I'll have a go, and the CMO might want to provide some more technical detail. This is a very new vaccine. As I said, it was only approved by the FDA very late in June, I think, in the US, and started to roll out shortly after that. It is a different dose. It's a different vial, so it requires a whole new manufacturing operation. And as I said, there were really no countries that had procurement arrangements for that vaccine either. So from a very quick start, you see countries in North America and Western Europe and here in Australia looking at trying to secure supplies pretty quickly of this vaccine at a time when there is a pretty limited number of doses on the global market. So we're all negotiating pretty furiously with Moderna for that supply. As well as that, of course, I think I've indicated that Pfizer also has a product for 6-month to 4-year-olds, I think theirs is, which has been granted approval to submit an application to the TGA. It hasn't yet done that. We expect that to happen pretty shortly. And then there will be a TGA approval process for that vaccine. And we're obviously also talking to Pfizer about securing supplies of their version in the event that it's approved.
So is it sort of TBA as to when we'll actually get supplies here, or would you hope that it'd be in the next 2 months, 3 months? Do you have a time frame?
Well, we're in active negotiations with Moderna now. We have been for some weeks. I think I first met with Moderna about this at least a couple of weeks ago. I think as soon as the US FDA approval was granted. So those negotiations have been going on for some weeks. It's not just the legal technicalities of that negotiation, it's really the realities of the global supply that Moderna is trying to satisfy a whole bunch of different potential customers. But I hope to be able to have some more to say about that in the near future. I really just want to stress though, for parents of children this age, that although the TGA has granted provisional approval of this vaccine, there is no action for you to take yet. That there is still a number of hurdles to jump, not least of which is supply of something which is highly sought after on the global market.
Just on that.
So did I have anything you wanted to add about the nature of the virus?
The antigen itself is the same, but it's a much smaller dose, and it's as the Minister said, it's a completely different vial, and it's different in the constituents. So it has to go through that process itself, and it's not as simple, unfortunately, as just diluting one of the adult doses.
Just on that, given the situation we face ourselves in at the moment with those surplus vaccines that we've actually already purchased, is that a consideration in the sort of negotiations you're going through now and not over-ordering?
Well, yes, I can say in the broadest possible terms. Obviously, I don't want to go into the details of the negotiations we're having, but the point you make is obviously a factor in our minds as we approach those negotiations, and also something that Ms Holton is considering in her review.
When can we expect ATAGI to have made a decision on Moderna's Omicron specific? The TGA to have made their decision on Moderna's Omicron specific booster?
Look, I don't have a specific date for that, as I think I've indicated that is under consideration right now. I mean, the TGA really has just worked magnificently right through this pandemic, as well as all of the usual work that they have to undertake to continue the supply of good quality medicines to Australia. They've done all of this work on vaccines and antiviral treatments in really good time compared to all of its equivalents across the world. So I want to make sure that TGA understands it should do its work thoroughly according to the best possible timeframes it comes up with, but I would have thought we'd expect that in the reasonably near future, but that's really a matter for TGA.
Can I just make a point, Minister, that it's really important, and we've both said it today, the best thing you can do to protect yourself at the moment is to have the vaccine that's available. And my colleague in Victoria, I'll quote him, Brett Sutton, the best vaccine you can get is the one that's available today, and that's still the case. So for anyone who might be considering waiting for these other vaccines, don't wait. With this wave, we want everyone to get that third or fourth dose, whichever one you're due for now.
And just one more, you might have touched on it, but if you get COVID with this latest wave, how long are you immune for before you can get it again?
So the immunity question, this was something that was covered in the AHPPC statement recently about a change in advice there. Again, it's based on the science. We know about this. We know enough about this new variant that that reinfection is much more possible than previously and earlier than we previously thought. And so that is the appropriate advice. About 1 month or more after your previous infection, you may have COVID again, and so go and get that test. In terms of what happens with this particular variant and how that might protect against the next variant, because there will be a next variant, that's pure speculation. I can't tell, but I do know that the BA4 and the BA5 variants can escape that immunity from previous infection, either Omicron or one of the other ones prior to that.
Can I ask one more just tricky one? I think about 2 weeks ago you launched a new advertising campaign around the antivirals and the vaccines as well, and I think National Cabinet agreed that the states would run their own campaigns around mask wearing, if I'm correct. With the reiteration of this advice today, will we see, I guess, a further revitalisation of that campaign or a renewed pushing out of that campaign? And can you kind of run us through what that looks like at the moment and who it's reaching?
Yeah, so a few weeks ago, I can't quite remember the precise date, but a few weeks ago I announced the launch of our winter campaign, particularly focused on booster doses, but generally on a range of other behaviours that will help you protect yourself against COVID, and that's been rolling out over recent weeks. We decided not to release a campaign on antivirals until such time as we had the expanded access. We didn't want to roll a campaign out and have a whole lot of people find that they had to jump through a whole lot of very difficult eligibility hoops. So having done that now, I have asked my department to finalise in the very near future an information campaign to promote awareness among the community about the access to these treatments and how effective they can be, particularly for older Australians or Australians who might have other health issues in preventing severe disease. We're already, though, since the decision of the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee was accepted by the government early last week, rolling out very substantial communications to general practitioners in particular, so that they are aware of the changes. Webinars through the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Professor Michael Kidd, direct communications, but there will be a broader information campaign on antivirals to the community in the near future. As for other advice we can provide to the community around some of the measures that Professor Kelly has outlined, we remain very open to continuing to review the range of our communication activities to the community and make sure that they're up to date. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this is not just a Queensland problem, it's actually the whole of Australia.
So presumably most residents have been vaccinated. How sick are they getting? How badly is it affecting them?
We've got 70% of aged care residents who've had their 4th booster shot. So we've got a pretty good level of protection. And the big plus this time round compared with the Omicron wave back in January is that we actually have antiviral medications available right across.
And force them to stay home from work. You can't take away someone's income and then say, well, and force them into that sort of circumstance and then say you're going to do nothing about it. As I say, the problem though is the administration of this. And Ali, there is only one place where this all lands, and that is where I've said it's going to land at some point, and that is that we remove all restrictions and get back to something approaching normal with life. This is an endemic disease. It's going to continue to change. Now, if
so when do you think the politicians are going to listen to you, Chris?